This is Mark Gun Media. Hit
it! Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and do not reflect those of any sponsors, advertisers, or any entity associated with this broadcast. Here is your host, Mark Gunn.
Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. My name is Mark Gunn. We have been on a little bit of a hiatus, and for good reason. Real life gets in the way. And we decided to do a little bit of retooling as far as the podcast goes. I mean, in the past episodes, which are available wherever you get your podcast, we go heavy on political and social issues. And over the last little bit, we've decided, well, we want to go a little bit more into the human condition, more slice of life. So my goal with this podcast is to introduce you to some very unique and unusual people that have rather unique and unusual stories. And the young lady that you are seeing right now is somebody I've been trying to get a hold on this podcast for months. And when it comes to the subject of transracial adoptions, people hear that and they go, but typically people just simply don't know the facts. For instance, transracial adoption in this country is not as prevalent as a lot of people would think. And when you break it down racially, you're looking at maybe 10% of Black children or children of color are actually adopted by white foster families, whereas 51% of white children are adopted by white families. But here in this case, this is a rather unusual case because let's take everything I just told you and flip it. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to my buddy, my pal, Brandy David. Brandy, how are you, love?
I'm great. Thank you. Yeah, everything you just said is, facts, and very, very seldomly. I mean, we're talking 2023. We almost never see, white people that are adopted into, Black families, be it African families or African American. In my case, it was a mix, of family members that actually came here from Nigeria and in African American. And I make that distinction because that's very, very important to say. That is why I make that distinction. When you have a mother that's learning how to drive for the first time in Detroit, Michigan, and she goes down a one-way street, you need to make that distinction. So that's important. Yeah, but you almost never see that. And then when you take a step further and you say before camera phones and technology where people could really, take notice to the fact that it was happening. Right. So all the more reason. I mean, let's be clear. Black people were raising white children for many, many years. So I want to say that. But right. I'm saying through our judicial system where they were actually adopting and giving their flowers, as I want to say. We're talking, I was born in the 70s.
Right. Now, and your story is quite different because you're a child of Italian immigrants. You came Correct. Here at the age of 5. And what happened there? How did you come to end up being adopted?
So my Italian mother passed away when I was 6 years old. My father was actually from Germany. He came here at 6, ironically, and he did not in part was unable to keep me. Right. Having said that, my mother, just before she passed away, I was already being raised in Detroit, Michigan, which is a very mixed community. It was very mixed at that time. She was very sickly. And it's just that it's a community. The community was already helping her because she was not able to get up, go get groceries, take me to church, things like that. and they began taking me to church and stuff for her because she was a very religious woman. So that's how that came to be. Shortly before she died, she knew it must, it was getting close to the end for her. So she voluntarily gave me up for adoption. So that's how that came to be, because as it became very, very close, I mean, within days of her dying, she did not want me to actually witness her pass away.
Right.
So she voluntarily gave me up. And since Black women were already as a community raising me, essentially, or helping contribute to raising me, teaching me English, taking me to, church, a lot of church. It was just a natural transition for me to be placed. There was a local orphanage, actually, and that's how it came to be. And it was not an easy transition for me to be adopted by one of the women in the home. One would think that it would have just been as simple as somebody being able to legally adopt me, but there was a lot of resistance by the government.
And to your point, because when you were adopted, from what I remember, you didn't speak any English and you were learning.
Correct.
And B, as far as transracial adoptions are concerned, back then and to a degree now, they were pretty much frowned upon. So,
correct.
It wasn't easy for a white family to adopt a Black child, let alone a Black family to adopt a white child. In fact, I think it was harder, right? Correct.
And it's still, from, my, and I know that I get a lot of backlash for speaking out the way I do, because I try to use a lot of humor, but it's still hard to reach people and have them reach reality, as I call it. But statistically, I just tell people, look at the statistics. Statistically, we're in 2023 and it's almost unheard of. It's not as though, this very loving community of people are just simply unwilling to adopt white children. That's just not the case. It's a matter of there is resistance. There is resistance by the government. I mean, the government is predominantly run by white people.
Yeah, right.
So it's this is simple math, so the fact of the matter is that if white people themselves are having resistance, even adopting white children, Black children, it statistically doesn't make sense that Black people will have an easy time adopting white children. So certainly you go back, like I said, I'm in my mid 40s. You go back to 70s and 80s. They certainly weren't going to make it an easy path for anyone of color to adopt me. And they certainly put up a bunch of barriers. So, yeah. And what's unfortunate is that, like I said, I was already being raised in a community that was teaching me English, taking me to church, feeding me, clothing me. I mean, so it just didn't make sense to not make that an easier, more natural transition. The government.
The fact that you were already being raised by this family had to be brownie points for the government to say, it's like, okay, she's already there. And even though we don't want this to happen, even though it's, we frown upon this, it doesn't make sense to not let this adoption take place.
Correct. So that's why I speak out against racism. That's why I ask people to listen and say, I'm telling you as a white person that there is very clear racism happening in our country, happening in our government. It doesn't, I didn't wake up one day and say, let me tell you this whole fabricated story. And where's the benefit for me? I could have easily stayed silent and had all of the full benefit of being a white person.
Right.
Clearly,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? And I certainly, there are all these privileges, if you will, of being white.
Mhm.
And I'm saying that Black people are being discriminated against, and other marginalized groups that are people of color. And that includes what I witnessed on some level of, pockets of our community that were Asian and, Pacific Islanders. There weren't as many, but certainly we had little towns within Detroit called like Little Asia and things like that you would, befriend and whatnot. But for me, what I can speak to firsthand, having, been raised until 16 by an all Black family, all Black church, that I reaped the most reward when be sent to a better school system than my sisters. Like there was always, we'll do better by her. And there wasn't a justifiable reason for it, because certainly I wasn't the smartest I wasn't showing like leaps and bounds ahead in school or anything like that. I wasn't like coming home with homework that was saying like, whoa, this one's going to be gifted. If anything, it was actually my sister Shamika was like, she even had, like, I always joke and say she had a smart walk, and we'd be like, oh God, here she comes again with the books in front of her doing the bounce, it was freaky. She was so smart. We were like, she's going to be president at like 10, so there was clear racism, like the fact that there was just such resistance, the fact that they, like my mama Charisse, who you hear me constantly teasing on TikTok and constantly doing impressions of and stuff. The fact that there was never a legal adoption, there was just, they kept me in a small orphanage or children's home. And she was my mama, but unofficially. That is really troublesome that there was never a legal adoption.
Let me ask about that. So, for all intents and purposes, your mother had custody of you.
I technically was I kept getting shuffled around in different, homes. First, I started out in a large, they kept trying to place me with distant relatives that I had never met, like trying to locate them. So when you get placed in the system, what they'll do is they'll send out letters to any random person they think you might be related to. And see if they want you. And there's the problem. It really displays racism. If they think you might be like a 12th cousin twice removed, they'll send out relatives so they can skin match you with that white person, because anything to make sure that a white person is adopting this white child. And so that happened just for years. All the while, my like Mama Charisse and Daddy James were going through all the legal steps to adopt me. They jumped through hoop after hoop after hoop. And keep in mind that they're both went to Division I schools. We're talking educated, that to this day work for the system.
Oh, okay. Okay. Once again, we are talking with Brandy David, who is a friend of mine from TikTok, talking about transracial adoptions. Hers is a case that is one of the most unusual, because typically when you talk about the issue of transracial adoption, it's usually white families adopting Black children. But this was a case where it was the other way around. And growing up, you said you were with your family until 16. What was growing up like? Because I know one of the big issues when it comes to this type of thing is being culturally aware. You coming from an Italian family, being raised in a Black household, what was that like in your formative years?
So honestly, up until 6, I already had a lot of exposure to, like, all my friends were really Black. Detroit, like I said, is you're already kind of part of the community. And my mother had already sent me. I mean, I was going to First Baptist Church of Detroit, which is kind of unusual for an Italian woman to send you to, a Baptist church.
Right.
So I really had a lot of exposure already. And then, honestly, I like when I joke and brag about like I was loved so good that I didn't notice I was white. Clearly I noticed, but I was being treated very much like everyone else. I mean, the discipline was really the same. I mean, we would do crazy things like try to sneak and put my hair in braids and stuff. And I did, I mean, crazy. Like it would take like a week to get hair grease out of my hair because like a week. We would just have to keep washing it and keep washing it. But then there would be other things like I had to get lotioned up differently because like when I go outside, if we didn't put like a ton, my mama would go overboard and put so much lotion on me. I looked like I had some kind of weird disease. So, because clearly they never had a white child. So I would literally, I went outside, like nobody wanted to play with me because they looked at me like I literally looked like I had like a sheet of lotion on me. So just like stay away from the white child. Like she's got something, So I mean, I did bad things. Like now I look at it like it clearly now as an adult, if I did that, I'd be like, I don't know how anyone had patience for me. Like I would do things like I would be running up and down the aisle in church and trying to mimic like all the Black women raising my hands and acting like I felt the Holy Spirit. And now I know like that is so inappropriate on so many different levels. But I was a baby, but it was so extra. It was very, very like, it was next. Like that's why I joke, like, I swear all white people have an inner Karen in them. Like it's just there. It's just real. Like it's just something you can't remove from them. I swear it's in our DNA. But, so there was clearly like differences, I think, because, I don't know. Like, I feel like I was just really, really loved, special and different. I think sometimes I took extra patience, like that kind of business. Like I really, really took like a different kind of patience because I feel like there's some things that I bet that is instinctually just born into Black children, like they'd know better. Where me, I had a question for a question. Like I swear that my mamas would be like, child, you just wake up with a question. Just your question has a backup question. Like literally I heard that every single morning. But you would think at a certain age, I would have stopped asking a question with my question. And I never did. Never. Literally, I had a question prepared every morning. And like literally, I was always underfoot. Always, I stayed underfoot, and I think it's something genetic. I literally am like I swear to God, because I hear all the time like, like I see on TikTok, and I think I literally notice like white people do. I hate to say it like that, but I guess I feel like I have consent just being white. But like white people ask so many questions. And I'm like, oh my God, I did. Yes, white people ask a lot of questions. But so there's just like, I don't know. I just feel like I was loved really good. And I took a certain amount of patience. I really did. So there's like certain things I learned from that, like, between the races, but I don't know, like some things I didn't notice. There was like no difference. And I don't know, like sometimes when I'm on TikTok, I'm like, I don't know if this will ever get through to people and like we can build bridges, but I think it takes honest dialogue. And some of it's just laughing, like really like laughter like that. Like white people ask a million questions. Like they really do.
And that has been your approach as far as it relates to TikTok, because that's how I found you. I forget which one it was. I couldn't, because there's been so many.
I make a lot of videos. I mean, I'll go in spurts. Sometimes I will stop for a few months and then I'll make more.
Right.
But I try not to be too aggressive. I mean, it's crazy because that is one thing too I notice is that like white people will say things are very aggressive, where in Black community, I noticed that I'm more I'm well received. My personality doesn't come off as aggressive, but more confident and assertive.
I'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick break, and we've got Brandy David. We're talking about transracial adoptions, gunshots straight from the hip. More right after this.
As a business owner, one of your biggest concerns is marketing your products and services. What message do I want to send? Who am I sending the message to? How do I reach the largest number of them possible? And how do I make it cost effective? The answer to all of these questions is Mark Gunn Media Inc. With over 4 decades of multimedia experience, from producing your commercial to giving you a winning strategy for marketing your business, Mark Gunn Media can help you get the best possible outcome. Just ask any of our past clients, and they'll tell you that Mark Gunn Media gets results. For more information, call 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283.
For downloads of this and past episodes, along with information about the multimedia services we offer, go to markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com.
Welcome back to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. My name is Mark Gunn, and we are talking about transracial adoptions with my guest, Brandy David. You can find, where can they find you on TikTok, Brandy?
It's Brandy with a Y, David 88.
Hey, Brandy David 88 on TikTok. We're talking about transracial adoptions in the fact that Brandy is one of the few white children that was adopted by a Black family. Now, we talked about some of your formative years, and you said that you were with your family to the age of 16, right?
Yes. So from 6 to 16, that's the first 6 years was with my Italian family. My mom died when I was 6.
Right. And so you're growing up in this family, you're getting to adulthood. What was that like for you?
So I always tell people, I feel really blessed. I mean, there were experiences that were, I don't touch on it a whole lot because I feel like I believe in manifestation. So if you spend a lot of time speaking negative into the universe, you'll attract more of it. But I also believe that it's educational for those that have had troubles in their childhood. So I also honor that and try to teach kids that it's not where you've come from, it's where you're going. So I did have to have visits with some distant biological relatives and things like that because I still was, for all intents and purposes, property of the government. So when I went on visits and different things, I've spoken about that where I did get, unfortunately abused. And it speaks to the value of how important it is that the government changes. It's racism so prevalent that it was so important that the government kept trying to place me with white people that kept getting sexually abused and things during those visits. And then it would be the responsibility, the government kept putting it on Black people to fix me up and heal me, if you will. And yet, so they were good enough, if you will. Hence, I quote that, good enough to try to raise this white child, fix me, give me therapy, church, and all these things, educate me, but they weren't good enough to give them credit or anything else. And they didn't want to talk about how these white folks were sexually assaulting me and doing all of these negative things. But when I got that scholarship at 16 years old and they emancipated me, made me a legal adult, they sure did parade me around on a stage when they made me Michigan's success story. And I had, because I got a scholarship and they had selected a success story and they had this big black tie affair for the centennial dinner. So when they were raising money for the state of Michigan, they selected me to do their public speaking and they didn't invite my family to the event.
So you were basically their poster child.
Correct. And so I speak to it in one of my videos, and I turned down the dinner, but they still used my story.
Mm-hmm.
So they quite literally showed a video of me flashing a bunch of photos and stuff. So I thought that was highly disrespectful to my family, because they only got one ticket for me and not my mother's or anyone, like my sister's, nobody. So they didn't. And I was like, no, of course I'm not going to attend. So I think that that's really, they didn't give anyone, in my family, literally nobody that raised me, not even my biological mother, like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
For the first 6 years that had, dedicated life to us and had the foresight to leave me with the Black community to raise me. So I just thought, no, you want all the glory, but honestly, if it was up to you, who knows what would have happened to me. So So at 16, I said, well, let me not let my family down. I'm going to just keep going. So I did, I made note of that, though. I kept all my receipts for that, because there's even video footage of it and everything, because they had to send me a copy of it legally.
Right.
They send it was on VHS then, but I have a copy of it and everything. And I got a letter from, it was Governor Engler was their governor at the time.
Right.
And so they sent me a copy of it. He sent me a congratulations letter for my scholarship and stuff. But again, nobody ever thanked my family, nothing. And said, like, good job. She's 16 years old. We emancipated her. She's got a scholarship to college, nothing. And so I just thought, like, it's all of these things kept being displays of like blatant racism in America, and within just that government. At that point, I'd never really been outside of Louisiana or Michigan. So I had a very narrow scope.
Right.
But then I went for the government, and I had a very, very clear scope of like, no, this is happening everywhere. So, I just, when social media became a thing, because clearly I was born before internet, I said, I need to speak out about this. This is not okay. It's just that it's just not okay, especially being the mother of a person of color. I said, no, I want more for my child than this.
And speaking of which, because I know for a lot of people on social media, they tend to try to find their niche. Yours, it just seems like, was already carved out for you. But how did you get to the approach to where you found humor to be the best way to get your message across? I mean, were you somebody that was always funny, or did you find you're funny, or how did that whole process evolve?
I was always the funny one as a child. And I think that also kind of saved me a lot when I was little, because I was always working someone's nerves. And I think that, like, my family's always funny. I was always working someone's nerves. I mean, sometimes I didn't even realize I was funny. It's just because I literally always, I never stopped talking. And sometimes, like, I heard, like, child, you don't know when to stop. And it's because I didn't actually know when to stop. And like, when I say, like, I do all these impressions about how it's like, child, you about to meet Jesus. I really think a couple of times maybe I flatlined and I met Jesus. I might have. And I think it was my sense of humor that might have saved me or brought me back a couple of times. Yeah, because I honestly, I might not actually be white. I think I might have just got the color scared right out of me, because I was that bad. Really, I was just a whole mess as a child. So I'm still waiting for my soul to be FedEx to me, because I'm not even kidding. Like, my whole pulse, I'm just waiting for it to arrive, because I was that bad. No, I always tried to be silly, and like, I lighten things up a lot, because, that's a lot of females in one house. 5 sisters, and then there was just acting like a maniac, and, so Yeah, I just found humor to just, deal with things. And it took me a long time, if I'm being honest, because I had 6 biological siblings.
Hmm.
And when my mother died, I was one of those people that disconnected from it.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite cope. So I think my way of coping was through humor. So I think I just learned early on to use humor as a coping mechanism.
Now, have you connected with your biological siblings?
Yes. I even use humor with that too, and kind of joke that, we waited a long time just so, we wanted to make sure that we had mediators there, Black mediators, just to make sure that there was no accidental pregnancies, because white people do white people stuff. And no, I'm joking. No, we all did meet, and I'm happy to announce that there was no marriages involved. We met, and there was nothing weird happened. We're just no, they're actually really great. We only connect once in a great while.
Mm-hmm.
My little biological sister and I are closer. I actually. I don't talk about it a lot on TikTok to respect their privacy, but my biological brother and sister, there's not a huge age difference. We were half siblings.
Right.
And I actually tried to adopt them.
Oh, okay.
So when I got a little older,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them has some challenges. That's why he's even though we're close in age, mentally not close in age. So if that makes sense, there's some delays there. So I don't talk about it a lot on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
And my biological sister, and I keep in touch because she ended up taking care of them a little more.
Gotcha.
So anyway, but no, the older ones and I, we only periodically touch base every few years just to see how one another are doing. And I, on a couple of lives, I've told some funny stories about us, connecting. Ironically, all of us had not the same story, but very similar stories ending up in like blended families and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how ironic that is, since I guess that's probably the way she designed it. Our mother designed it.
Right.
But
Once again,
not in the same family.
No, similar, but kind of different.
Well, in the sense of like, it seems like, maybe that's the way she designed it by placing all of us with queens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say it's similar. I mean, we ended up in different states and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, we all initially ended up in Detroit, but not the same family. And then, but when we reconnected, it was very interesting to find out that we all ended up in blended families. And I was like, I'm the only one that ended up the only white child in their family.
Right.
But interesting to learn that all of them grew up in such diverse families. And I was like, you know what, you guys are all right. We can be cool. Y'all are all right. I was glad. Let's just say I was glad to find out none of them ended up Karen or Kyle's. I was like, all right. Yeah. So we stay in touch, just not, you hear the sibling stories where people reconnect and they like can't live apart and stuff. We didn't have that kind of connection, but still very cool. It's nice to stay in touch.
All right. Once again, we're talking with Brandy David about transracial adoptions, and fast forward a little bit because you mentioned this in passing, and it's ironic, but at the same time, it's not. You said you do have a child of color.
Yeah.
And I know that they're now. He's what, 5, 6?
He's 6.
He's 6. Okay.
Almost 7.
Oh.
Killing me.
Okay. Now, with raising a biracial child,
mm-hmm.
What kind of challenges have you as a parent run into, if any?
One of the biggest things that some people might think that I'm a little, I don't know, snotty about this or whatever word they might choose. I'm very firm about, I don't like people touching his head. It's how we were raised. That was, I model a lot of my parenting after Mama Sharice and just a lot of the women in my community. It wasn't as applicable to me, even though some people thought my hair was cool and tried to reach for it. But even though it happened, less than a fraction of the time to my head as it did my sister's, it was a no, do not touch a Black woman's head. And now I see people wanting to do that with my son, because even though he's really light skinned, I mean, he's light, even though you can't tell him that. But he has a little fro, you know, and it's kind of, it favors mine. But I started setting those boundaries with him as a baby that I didn't, because it's strange. More adults do it than children, but I knew he would go to school with a lot of Caucasian kids in the daycare that he was going to go to. So I said, he came home one day, I picked him up from school daycare at the time, and he was crying because he's firm about his boundaries. And a child had their hands in his hair, and the teacher didn't, she didn't think it was a big deal and was like, he's so upset about this. I don't, all it was just little kids were trying to touch his hair, and one kid led to another kid, and he felt very overwhelmed by it.
Well, yeah.
And it's like, well, I told her, I said, well, I'm sorry. We do not let him have anybody's hands in his hair. And I'm glad that he had really stayed firm on his boundaries because he was pushing the kids away from him. I'm very firm about that. I think with biracial children, with any children, but especially biracial children, sometimes people get fascinated by them having froze. And, because sometimes with him being light, they can't tell what his race is. So it's all the more fascinating because they're like, oh, wow. They want to see if his hair's soft or if it's thick or that it's a textural thing. Right. And so it's interesting, especially with adults, that they think they have consent to reach for children's heads. Like, I sometimes visualize and I almost laugh about it and think, can you imagine just walking up to somebody in a supermarket or something and I just reach over and grab your head? What in the Lord? You cannot do that. I do not touch folks' head. That is so weird. So that's one of the biggest challenges. I know it seems so minor, but I think if my son lets down his defenses and you touch his head, what is it? Where does it stop? As a mother, I feel defenseless sending him out in the world because children sexually abuse other children and start with the head and then it's a little touch here, little touch there. And that's why I have to be so firm. We live in a very dangerous world. We just do. I'm sorry to say it, but I need it. So I get scared about that. And the other thing is that because he is so fair skinned for being biracial, is he asks a lot of questions because he's 6 and he's very intelligent, and he asks, and now that I'm divorced, he will ask things like, is daddy not going to love me anymore because I'm light like you? Or he'll get very demanding and say like, I'm a brown man. And like, just, he flips and he'll say like just different. And I'm like, whoa, he's 6 and he's just, so there's just challenges that I'm not sure. Like, I want him to know you can love all of you. You don't have to make a decision. So,
and one of the things that I know for certain, and I see discussions about this all the time, where people will try to assign a race to a biracial child. And you have to tell them, it's like, look, what you think doesn't matter because it's going to be their experiences that shape how they self-identify. Yes. And it's not, it's not a knock against one parent or the other. It's just what this child has gone through throughout his time in this society. So I know it's important to, and you've already touched on this, is to make sure that he has a full breadth of his culture on both sides of the family. With your rather unique background, that has to be a mosaic that is absolutely insane.
And he's loved so good. Like both of, I mean, we're both as parents, we're always going to love him. And I try to tell him that, like, you wouldn't be here if we didn't both love you. Like, we love you. That's all that matters is mommy and daddy love you. That's it. It's not a decision. We don't love a part of you. We love all of you.
Mm-hmm. And, with you being a parent, single parent, and a career woman, what was your degree actually in?
So it's crazy. I went to school and all I did was go for general studies. But while I was going to school, I was it's interesting. I actually randomly, right outside of high school, went to work in a collection agency. And then it started my career in finance. Long story short, I went to work for the government and I got into risk management. So I got into bank securities. And then next thing you know, I went to work in a very specific area for the federal government and finance. So that's it. I never intended on working in finance. I never intended to work for the government. It's just one thing led to the other. So I never actually even intended to go to school for finance or anything. That's not what I went to school for. It's just how things kind of
played out.
It was a happy accident. Let's call it that.
Oh, okay.
It's and then I retired after 15 years so I could become a mom, opened up a little store. After retirement, when my son started doing daycare, I opened up a ladies' boutique, which unfortunately, when COVID hit, I think I was talking to you about that a little bit before. Yeah. It ended up, I officially have closed it now because I was really struggling during COVID. So. Yeah, I was paying more to keep it open, and it was supposed to just be kind of fun, raise some money, and it ended up costing more than it was not successful. Let's put it that way. So, yeah. So anyway, it's that.
You gave it a shot. So
I gave it a shot. Hey, I would rather fail at something trying than have not at least gave it a shot. So.
Right. And again, to bring everything full circle, because it's like if you take a look at your life thus far and the path that it seems to have gone on, you and your family are a part of this mosaic that I think is going to end up being the future of mankind. I think you are going to see a lot more of these types of blended families. You're going to see a lot of multiracial children and exposure to multiracial cultures, despite the government's best efforts. It's something that can't be stopped. Now, for those that are in a situation where adoption is an option, or maybe there's a parent that has recently adopted a child or anything like that, what kind of, if you had to tell either an adopted child or an adopted parent one thing that was extremely profound in your life, what would that be?
I would say, don't ever give up. Even if it seems like everything's against you, like Mama Sharice and I, and Daddy James, one thing that has been just so incredible about our story, our journey, is that, there was quite literally a time where, my mama lost her job while taking all of the appropriate steps
fighting for adoption of me. And you are today, we're telling our story, and we're not all of it is my story to tell. And that's why I make it a point to not tell every part of it, because I don't want to be centered. That's, because that's something that unfortunately white people tend to do, and that's not right. So I don't want to be centered. And it's important that my mama and daddy get their, finally get their opportunity to be lifted up. But I will say that don't ever give up. And a piece of paper doesn't make you family. And
Right.
that's one thing that this government will never have over us. We have always been family. That is my mama. You'll see actually one of the last comments that she made in one of my goofy videos. She already put it as she put in those comments. She is mine. That's right. That's my mama. And I am her child. No piece of paper. So if you have, if you feel in your heart that somebody is your parent or your child, vice versa, whatever the situation is, then in there, go through the appropriate steps. And at some point they age out. I don't, there's that, at the end of the day. I mean, it's unfortunate that, like in my case, and again, I just am using this as an example. I don't want to, I'm not intentionally trying to center myself, but it's for a point. It's unfortunate that the system would have rather put me out on my own and made me a legal adult at 16 years old than had me in a family setting. However, I aged out, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
So that's why I say, don't give up. Go through the appropriate steps. Whatever those appropriate steps are, follow your heart, follow your gut instinct. I hear a lot from foster parents where they say, I don't want to, I'm scared because I don't want to get attached to a child, because what if they get taken from me and this and that? They very well may, but then that was God's plan, or whoever it is that you believe in, that may have been the steps. But you have to, if your heart was in it to help the child, love them more than you love yourself, because you may have only been intended to be in their life for 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, or whatever it is. My mom intended to be in my life for as long as she was for that part of our journey. And then we reconnected. There was a time where we could not be with one another, but look what she's done for my life. There was never a time, even though we couldn't physically be in each other's life, that she did not influence my life. I went on to go to college. I went on to be a business owner a couple times over. And every single day she influences the mother I am. And let me tell you, my child will tell you I'm the best mama in the world. You can't. So you get what I'm saying? Like my father, there's probably not a video I don't sneak in a way to praise my mom. I'm just telling you. So if it's intended to be, that's what I would say. That's the best advice I can give, is that you've got to, as long as you're doing it with a pure heart, because there's a lot of women out there who tried to adopt me for one reason or another, and I did not give them any kind of acknowledgement. As soon as I see them try to request me or something, I hit block instantly. Because I can't tell you how many times I see a woman on there that'll go, don't you remember me? I tried to adopt you. Like, oh, I do remember you. And that's why I'm hitting this block button.
There you go. So once again, we have been talking with Brandy David about transracial adoptions. Brandy can be found on TikTok. Her unique perspective, her unique brand of humor is what attracted me to you in the first place. And I remember one of our earlier conversations, I've got to get you on my podcast because yours is such a unique story. So I thank you for finally making it.
No, thank you. I appreciate you so much. Oh, thank you.
You've been listening to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and do not reflect those of any sponsors, advertisers, or any entity associated with this broadcast. You can download this or any past episodes by logging on to markgunmedia.com, the Mark Gun Media YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have any comments or want more information about how to be a sponsor, log on to our website at markgunmedia.com or call 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Thank you for listening.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.